With our current company, which was started in 2000, we're developing new types of 3D imaging technology for different kinds of applications. First of all, we're doing 3D motion printing, for instance, for advertising applications, and I have some examples. Here's an example of a 3D print, and this print is going to be sold, by the way, on probably the shopping networks, and it commemorates Yankee Stadium. But you see the ball is floating off of the picture, and even though you don't have a 3D TV, you could sort of see that as I move it. We also have motion image technology. Here's an example of a motion image, and you can see him playing the drum. And it's just a thin piece of plastic that I'm holding here, not a video screen, and yet it looks like you're watching a video of somebody. And here's another motion image from a show, tango, and you can see them dancing the tango there, and the other people are in 3D behind them. So we have 3D and motion technology also for credit card applications, and we've signed an exclusive contract with Visa. Here's an example of a prototype credit card, and you can see the 3D in there and the planes moving on this card. And also here's another example of a motion and 3D card. So we are expecting to have these in production in the next 6 months. And other applications include security applications like this driver's license prototype from the state of New Mexico. And this is to prevent people from buying alcohol. And you see, if you are asked to show your driver's license before you purchase alcohol, which they do there, you can't get away with it, and you can't counterfeit this. So,
I didn't understand. How would that stop you from purchasing alcohol? Does it show your age? Is that...
No, your picture is there in 3D.
Right.
And it shows, zoom in, it shows that this is one of those cards that says no drinking and driving allowed. So in other words, this indicates that you're not allowed to buy alcohol, and in the state of New Mexico, when you go to buy alcohol, they want to see your license first, because if you're under 21 or convicted of DWI, they're not supposed to sell you alcohol.
Make this thin substance so available and beautiful.
Well, when we started the company, the aim was to produce three-dimensional images in a new way and for new applications. So one of the things we had to do was overcome the thick plastic that was used in 3D images previously. And actually we've gone another step further beyond what I've just shown you to this. This is also just as 3D and has motion. You can see the car zooming there and the dancers dancing on the screen. But this is so thin that it's like paper. And in fact, we now are working on our first order for this material for a book. And this will be the pages of the book as well as the cover of the book. So it's another advance in that type of 3D technology. There are many applications for this, and we can also convert two-dimensional images into 3D. That's very important. So if we take something that wasn't 3D, like this guy, he was 3D once, but not when I got this picture. So here's Van Gogh, and as you can see when I move it, it's three-dimensional. And even though you're looking at a two-dimensional screen, you can sort of see that just as I turn it. And the background behind him changes as I change the angle, and so does his face, and so on. And here's another example. This is a painting by Montaigne, Renaissance painting. And again, it wasn't 3D when he painted it, but look at the depth in there. And you can see everything is at a different level. Things are behind other things. So this allows us to convert two-dimensional images into 3D, which can be used in advertising for posters and for in-store displays and for postcard mailers and so on. So that's one of the main applications. But we've also branched into video. And that's very important because video is in everybody's life and it's flat. And that's not what real life is. So we've determined that we have to come up with methods to make 3D television possible. Right now we have a system that we're going to market for video gamers, people who have video game systems. You'll buy this system, you'll plug it into your video game, you'll put this little plastic thing on your monitor, and your game will now be three-dimensional. So that's a video conversion system. It'll also work with movies. DVDs, live television, any type of video feed. So that's 3D applications in video. And then we went one step further. What you've seen in Star Wars and in Minority Report, we have a system that projects three-dimensional video into midair. So the images are floating in the air, you can put your hand through it, and yet it's real looking. It looks like it's really there. So our first application is advertising. We're working with a major advertising company in Europe at this time, and it's going to be put in supermarkets and project an image of a person, but changing into another person and products floating around and all kinds of very interesting effects that you can't do in real life, and yet it looks totally real. So those are the applications of 3D that we are now developing and products that we're marketing at our company.
You're able to have these things trip off your tongue as though they were easy. This must have taken you a number of years to come to this point. Am I correct?
No, actually, I thought of it yesterday. Oh, yes, yes. It's really been in development for 40 years. I've been working on this stuff for 40 years, and these different applications that I've just talked about are the culmination of 40 years of work.
You had an unusual understanding of 3D. In the old days, we all wore glasses to go to the movies to see a 3D movie. Even now, they have glasses to see. But your 3D doesn't require any additional glasses.
Right. This is because I spent so many years studying how we see in 3D and how the brain gives us that experience. And with that knowledge, I was able to also take my background in optics and form these new systems and materials to be able to create the 3D experience.
3D materials.
The new stuff that I've shown you are actually not holograms. It's what we call 3D HD. It's lenticular technology, it's called, and it's way different than the lenticular that we used to have in the old days of cereal boxes and Cracker Jacks. Believe it or not, these pictures have a micro lens array on the front that is so small you can't see it or feel it. But because it's not a hologram, it has a lot of advantages. And that means that it can be seen in regular light and it's full color, which holograms can't do. And of course, because it's so complex and it's so multidimensional, moving, and special effects, this cannot be counterfeited by anybody. So of course there are many security applications for it, and we're just beginning to get into them, like the driver's license and the credit card.
What would you say, given the breakthrough that we're looking at, that's going to become part of our everyday life thanks to your work, what do you think your next most important contribution might be?
Well, just recently I've come up with something new, which is really the next step from my digital projection technology. And that is something that you won't see for at least 5-10 years, I would guess. Right now we have digital video, we have LCDs, and that's brand new really. It's something that not everybody has yet. But what I've got is the next generation after that. This new idea, which is I just came up with recently, is going to replace all the LCDs in the world, because it's just as thin, but it's less expensive. It can be as big as you want, so you could have a wall-size display in your home, and yet it's not real expensive. And it works on a totally different principle, so it can be scaled up without big cost, and also it can be three-dimensional. So you can have a wall-size 3D TV screen in your home. You can use it not only for commercial TV and movies, but even your own home movies or whatever you like, and see 3D. So I think that is going to be the next generation and will then be in everybody's home for the next couple of decades.
Certainly your inventions impact not only the home, but science and medicine. I think people have experiences that they've required imaging, and they have also received the benefits of your research. Can you talk a little bit about the application of your work in the area of science and medicine?
Back in the 80s, I spent a lot of time making three-dimensional images with various hospitals. And we did three-dimensional images using ultrasound, using CAT scan, using MRI and X-rays. And by making the image three-dimensional, you have a much better idea of the relationship of the different things that you're looking at, the different pathologies that you're looking at. And it helps, for instance, if a surgeon wants to plan the operation they're going to do, to be able to see things in 3D in the relationship that they're going to find them when they go in. Or if you're planning a non-invasive radiation therapy, you have to know exactly how to aim the beams and make sure that you're not hitting the wrong things, and know from different angles the way it has to be approached. So a three-dimensional view is very helpful. So I did a lot of that work in the 80s. I worked with Raymond Demadian, the inventor of MRI, in 1980, in fact. And now the new technology that I just mentioned with the image that floats in midair is going to be used, I believe, in surgery, because with this new technology you can have a real-time MRI which takes the data from the inside of the patient's body and projects it on top of the patient's body, so the surgeon looks at the patient and the patient looks transparent. So for instance, if there's a brain tumor, instead of making an incision and fishing around for it, you look and you can inject the patient and watch the needle go in and make sure you don't hit the blood vessels and go right into the tumor, inject the tumor and come out again. And now it's the minimally invasive technique of attacking a specific tumor or other issue. So that's something that's going to come out of this technology in medicine as well.
This is amazing. What else would you like to talk about that's on your mind? Because, you know, I can navigate with you to almost any subject, but I think that your contribution in imaging is really remarkable. Is there something else we should be thinking about that you're bringing out that we haven't discussed?
The thing that I am most excited about, yes, that I've been working on since the 60s and finally has culminated in an understanding in 2005, is my work on the brain. I've been studying the brain and trying to understand how it works, as everybody else has, and finally, the result of all my research and luck and everything else I was doing led me to a comprehensive understanding of how the brain works. So in 2005, I began writing a book on it, and it's coming along, but it's slow because I don't have a lot of time to write it. But it's very important because it's a complete explanation of how the brain works, how it does what it does, and why it does what it does, how it evolved to do what it does. Now, once this book comes out, there are going to be very important practical applications that come out of this. First of all, pathologies that are psychological, such as psychosis, or neurosis, or personality disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder. These are disorders that have to do with negative programming that comes into the brain and then influences a person's life. Right now, the only real approach that we have to deal with that is psychotherapy, which can take years and maybe forever and never produce the result that you want. With this technology, we will be able to, and I don't mean in 50 years, I mean in maybe 10 years or less, we will be able to interact with the brain, with specific areas of the brain, non-invasively, with a very simple device that I have in the book, which will allow you to address the right areas of the brain, because I'm explaining how the brain works, so you can reprogram the brain. That way you can cancel the negatives that came in and created those psychological disorders in a very short period of time. So that's one of the practical applications that'll come out of this. Another set is, by interacting with the brain, you can have the imagery that's going on in your brain translated to digital imagery. So you could actually have a video screen or a recorder record your dreams and play them back on the screen.
Let's stop.
Understanding how the brain works means that we can take that information and create a computer with software that works the way the human brain works. That's very important. And that will be possible within a couple of years. Just takes a little funding and a little bit of work. Now that I have the architecture of how the brain works, we can use our current technology and don't have to come up with new technology, just configure it in the way that the brain does it. And by making a computer that works the way the brain works, amazing things will be possible. For instance, when you have software today that you buy that allows you to dictate and then it types, it's not very good, and it requires corrections about every line. Well, with this technique, it will be just as good as another human being. It will make mistakes as infrequently as another person. You can't get better than that. Also, a universal translator will be possible. You put it in your pocket, you can go to another country, you talk in your language, a little speaker will play it back in their language, they'll talk, it'll come into the mic, it'll go into your earphone, into your language. So you'll be able to converse with someone of another language and you don't have to know the language. Also, the technology can be used to make computers that you don't have to type on, you don't have to use a mouse, you just converse with the computer and it'll have a personality, it'll understand you, it'll be able to respond appropriately, eventually it'll learn your facial expressions, your moods. You'll come home, it'll say, "Oh, you had a hard day, what's wrong?" And you'll be able to have an intelligent conversation, it'll be able to be helpful. Computers will be able to be creative, they'll be able to solve technical problems, they'll be able to invent art and music. They'll be able to do whatever the human brain can do. And at last, we'll have a VCR that you can program. Just tell it what show to record and it'll do it.
Well, now those all bring up tremendous issues. We don't have time for all of them. But isn't it somewhat scary? I mean, science fiction has talked about this idea for years. If we have computers that can operate like the human brain, aren't we fundamentally putting human life at risk?
Well, you are very right, and this is something I address in my book. This will be a problem. There's no stopping it, and it's not just me. This will evolve eventually. The question of what is life will be brought to the threshold, because here will be computers that will have emotions, that will have feelings, that will have a sense of self, and now the question is, can you just turn off a computer? Can you just throw it away? Is it a living being? Sure, there's no biological cells, but there are still the same functions, consuming energy, the waste products are heat, but it still has all the other qualities. So that's one of the issues. The other issue is, as these are designed better and better, they really will get better than us. We are created and evolved by chance. The environment shapes the way that we have evolved, and it is not optimized. Our system is not an optimized system. But if we use our knowledge to change the evolution of this computer, it will become more efficient and better at doing what we do than we do it.
Certainly if you model it after the female brain as opposed to the male brain.
Of course. So we have to be very careful at the beginning stages to build in backdoors, to build in commands that will prevent the eventual runaway of the computers to become superior to humans and try to take over the human race.
We actually, on some level, already experience this on a microcosm. When you think about calling a large corporation and you reach a phone tree and you reach some sort of automated system talking back at you that doesn't allow you to ever get to a human being, we are actually experiencing computers taking over right now. It's a little bit frightening. I think this is a conversation to be continued with Gene Dolgoff, the CEO of the 3D Source. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you.
So